Hey guys, welcome back to King Kraken Sports. Mike here. We're back today with episode 3 of Scout Talk, where I go in depth as to the ins and outs of scouting for those of you who may want to actually try to do this yourself. And today we're going to talk about something really complicated. If you missed any of the other two videos, the links are going to be down in the description. I'm going to create a playlist for this. Tuesday we talked about when I got into scouting and how I got into scouting and what I did. Yesterday we talked about yesterday we talked about how to decide who you're going to choose. And today we're going to talk about the ultimate decision of when you actually scout, how to do it. Seems as basic as I can put it. So first thing you're going to want to do, you've decided now that you know who you want to choose to scout right away. How are you going to go about it? Well, before you do any of that, you need to actually come up with a couple of systems. So the first system you're going to want to develop is, how am I going to actually watch the film? Are you just going to try to rely on finding it on YouTube? Or are you going to try to find it on sites like Draft Breakdown or anything like that? Step one. How are you going to actually watch the film as well? You need to have a couple of different sources. So for me, I have my laptop, which I can either watch as is film on, or I can plug it into my TV and get a bigger view. I also have an iPad that I watch film on when I am either away from my laptop for whatever reason, or if I can't sleep at night, I usually try to cram one or two games in of a particular player. Not ideal. When you're really sleepy, sometimes you don't get the full spectrum, so if you do that, definitely go back the next day and watch it on a regular time slot. So there's the how am I going to do this? But the most important thing you need to do before you scout any player, before you scout anyone, any year, whenever you're starting, is come up with a quantitative method system. Now that sounds really complicated and really fucked up, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually relatively simple. In other words, come up with some sort of metric system, so come up with some sort of number-based system that you can officially figure out what a first round grade is, what a second round grade is, yada, 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 yada. Because it's really easy to say, well, I watched the tape, this guy's a first round pick, this guy's undrafted. But how do you quantify it? Because if you don't quantify it, you're going to end up falling into the same traps that I used to fall into, which is that you are going to either overvalue some traits or undervalue some traits. Overvalue the film, undervalue the film. It's bound to happen. Trust me. No one's perfect. I do it. I know of other scouts that do it. Just why you really have to make sure you stick to your system. So I actually wrote out my grading system. So my system is actually out of 100 points. And it's a number of different things that I have placed different emphasis on. And then once I factor them all together and add them up, it gives me a total grade out of 100, and then there's a minimum grade a player has to meet for a first rounder. So I hope you guys can read this. Sorry, my handwriting is really shit, and I realize it's going to be backwards. So I'm just going to read through. So for me, film, which is synonymous, interchangeable for me with talent, because it's what you show that you can do. Film and talent are where you show it. For me, that's 60% of a player's grade. If you don't have great film, you're automatically going to be behind the 8 ball. Leadership is 5%. Now, what I mean by leadership was you get a bonus for being a captain. Obviously any nicks off the field for off the field stuff that comes out of your leadership grade. Starts are in leadership, wins are in leadership, that type of shit. 15% is production. Now, some of you may be looking and go, well, why isn't production weighted heavily? Because if you weight production too heavily, then you're a box score scouter. You may see that someone gets 18 tackles in a game and go, well, linebacker X who got 18 tackles is fantastic because he got 18 tackles. But if you watch the film, he may have gotten 18 tackles, but they may have all been him just running down the defender instead of actually running down the opposing player rather than actually getting in front of the player and stopping them. So that accounts for 15%. Obviously, I don't want to overemphasize anything like tackle numbers, but I also don't want to downplay entirely, tackle numbers for someone like, hey, this guy's got 10 tackles, but such and such a trade is just absolutely incredible. No, it's again to just mitigate overvaluing certain things, and obviously film is king, so it's weighted the most. So right there, that is 80% of a player's grade for me. Then there's size. Now, I hate judging players based on size because, there are certain things you can't help. Certain guys can't help that they're short. Donnell Pumphrey, case in point. Donnell Pumphrey was weighed in on Tuesday at 5'8", 177 pounds, with 8 1/8 inch hands and 28-inch arms. He can't help any of that, really. That's just bad genetics. So I don't want to say that he can't play because he's too small. And I think, again, that's another thing that people get way too invested in. Teddy Bridgewater's got small hands, skinny knees. Jason Verrett's too short. Those guys have proven that they can play in the league. So that's why size is a very, very small factor for me. And really, the only time you get like a major league knock on your size is, let's say you're a corner, and everyone seems to be obsessed with corners that are 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". Copycat league, everyone's copying the Seahawks. But if you're a corner that's 5'7", you're going to get a pretty substantial size knock. And then last but not least is athleticism, which is worth 15%. That's where you're going to be looking at things like the Senior Bowl, as far as the other types of drills they do there, the Combine for sure, pro days, all that type of stuff. What you do is you look at the player and what the average is for the position for each individual drill, and you run it down, and you ultimately end up scoring it that way. So that is kind of what to look at as far as a grading system. Now, some general player evaluation tips. Everyone falls victim to this as well. So if it happens to you right off the bat, don't be ashamed. Don't give it up. It happens. One mistake a lot of people make when looking at players is they scout the helmet and not the player. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. From now on, there are certain players that left such a big mark on that school, for a certain position, that it's bound to happen. That a player from that school at that position who may be better or worse than one player is going to be either bumped up or bumped down. Based off, an example, Alabama running backs. Trent Richardson. Everyone missed on Trent Richardson. If you say that you didn't miss on Trent Richardson, you are absolutely lying to yourself. But if you looked at every Alabama running back since Trent Richardson and immediately labeled them a bust, you're scouting the helmet and not the player. Also, another way that can factor in is if you look at, let's say, player X is a wide receiver from Notre Dame, player Y is a wide receiver from Illinois. Similar builds, similar stats and all that. And for whatever reason, even though, when you look at your film, player Y, the Illinois guy, he's got higher grades. Part of you is always going to want to, grade that Notre Dame guy just a little bit higher because he did it at Illinois. He did it at Notre Dame rather than doing it at Illinois. It's always going to happen. You're always going to have those stats creep in. Don't allow those to happen. Now, another thing you're going to want to do when you start your evaluations is for every position, start with what do you value at that position. It's easier if you actually start just scouting one position at a time rather than just right down the board. So for me, I picked two positions that I played when I was playing football. I played offensive line and I played running back. So I know traits that I prefer in my offensive linemen and my running backs. So for me, technique is obviously the biggest thing for an offensive lineman. If you have bad technique, your film score is going to be down. Your athleticism score is going to be down. You're already way behind the 8 ball, and there really isn't much that can save it for you. Running back, the absolute must-have is vision. That's something Trent Richardson didn't have, and that's actually part of the reason I really started incorporating vision into my scoring. So for each position, just go down a list of traits that are must-haves, that if they don't have it, they're automatically going to get a really bad score, or at least behind the 8-ball score. And then a list of things that are nice to have, but not entirely necessary. So for a running back, you obviously want vision, you want good decision making, as far as when to hit the hole, do they hit the hole with power, and decisiveness. And if they can catch, then that's just a bonus. So that's going to do it for today, guys. As always, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. Be back at it again with another video tomorrow. What that video is going to be, not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure I'm actually going to start talking about post-evaluation. So yeah, just if you missed anything, go back. If not, and you're still not sure, let me know. Send me a message. I'll try to clarify it as best as I can. And until next time, guys, peace.